Hey everyone on YouTube, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while, it's been real. Welcome to my kitchen in our new place. This is going to be a very kind of informal, chatty video, and I'm going to be doing some dishes because, oh boy, we got some dishes to do. And also probably part of my head is gonna get cut off because I'm nearly 6 feet tall and I have the camera on top of our blender and then a stack of books. So we have a blender, stack of books, and then the camera, and I'm afraid to add more books because I don't want everything to fall. So we're just gonna work with what we got. And hopefully there won't be too many crazy loud noises. We're in our tiny home. We're finally installed in our tiny home. And which is nice after a move to finally, you know, after the chaos of a move to finally feel like you're settled in a new place. But the tiny house is one of two houses that is on this piece of land. Well, it's really like a plot in a city. And the house in front of ours on the same property is being renovated right now. And so during the day, there's a lot of like hammering and sawing and construction work going on. And so hopefully that won't get too annoying, because this is really the only time I have to film this video. Anyhow, today's video is going to be something along the lines of, or at least the title for it, you know, when you're a chaos witch, but the chaos gets a little too real sometimes. So I'm going to be talking about why I had to take a 2.5 or so month-long hiatus from YouTube, why I'm behind in the videos that I wanted to make, why my activity on Instagram has been pretty low since the beginning of the year. And I also I'm going to talk a little bit about like witching your way through apocalyptic chaotic shit, which 2020 and now that we're into 2021 has pretty much on a global scale been that epic apocalyptic level bullshit. You know, the pandemic has touched each and every one of our lives in different ways. People have experienced a lot of loss, but there's also been, you know, other types of experiences too. So take this as an open invitation from me to use my comment section to vent what you need to vent, to talk about what you need to talk about, your experience going through this pandemic and everything, whether you would call it good, bad, or just neutral. You know, a lot of people went through some pretty heavy shit during this whole process, but other people have also gone through beautiful things, and some people have had a bit of both. Usually that's how it goes, right? But sometimes the chaos of these sorts of things gets a little too real, and I consider myself a chaos witch, and I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by chaos and what I mean, or why I choose to call myself a witch and what magic is for me. But the chaos, especially in 2021, January, February, now we're into March, has been a little too real, a little too intense. It's been a lot, and I had to take time off from making videos for a reason, so I'll get into that, you know. So get your dishwashing gloves out, or get ready to fold some laundry, pour yourself a drink, and let's do this. Let me get some better lighting here. So where have I been? And just a warning, I'm going to be talking about some family medical emergencies that have come up, some financial situation that we're in, having to move because of that financial situation, some pretty heavy stuff, but you know, it's life. There's ups and downs, and I've just been I'm now feel like I'm coming out of a down. I feel like 2021 so far has been just as hard, if not harder, than 2020, because 2020 was really a year for me to turn inward and start to unpack about 2.5 decades worth of trauma from my childhood into my early adulthood that I had yet to fully unpack. It was very much an inward journey. The goddess Bridget was such an important part of that journey. She still is, because the journey is ongoing. Unpacking complex trauma or CPTSD, plus some traumatic events from my early 20s, and how those traumas are still affecting my life as an adult, and how I'm tired of that. And having to go on this journey basically by myself, because I don't really have access to professional help right now. That's the whole reason why I did the whole Sagittarius season book review series, which I still have to finish. And we're in Aries season now, so that's, you know, how late I am with everything. But I have one book left, and I have it's Pete Walker's Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, which is probably in the top 5 most important books I've ever read in my life. Incredibly important book, because that's the book that helped me have a name. Complex PTSD, that helped me have a name for what I went through and what I'm still going through. So that is forthcoming and about 3 months overdue. And then I also want to make a video talking about the things I've been able to do for myself to kind of get the ball rolling and begin my healing journey with this stuff, this heavy duty stuff, you know. Strategies for inner child work, and working through rage and anger, and processing grief, and working through shame, like internalized toxic shame, and the toxic inner critic, and perfectionism, and all of that. So I want to make a video kind of summarizing strategies and things I've learned along the way that I've been able to do for myself, you know, until I can have access to professional mental health, because I would love to work with a therapist that specializes in trauma. I just don't really have access to that right now. So I want to make that video, and then I want to get back to talking more about some witchy shit, because here in the southern hemisphere, I know the northern hemisphere is like, oh, it's spring, and I think spring, you know, has taken on, you know, a little extra special meaning and significance for people, precisely because of the quarantines and the stay-at-home orders and the social distancing and all the crazy shit that we've had to deal with. Us human beings as incredibly social creatures that, you know, by and large need relationships and social contact for our own health and well-being, at least on some level. Everybody's different. Some people are more introverted, others are more extroverted, but we all, in some way, shape, or form, at some level, need human contact and relationships, and this virus has, at least in-person contact and relationships, this virus has kind of screwed us all over, right? So anyway, I'm excited to be making more witchy and spiritual related content, and this video is kind of in that, along that vein, you know, talking about being a chaos witch, but when the chaos gets a little too real, I like how to kind of witch your way through it. And I have to say, my work on my trauma has helped me to begin to witch my way through it, because some of the same strategies that I use to cope with and process and, you know, deal with the effects of childhood trauma and trauma events in my early adulthood have also helped me to cope with the bullshit that we've been through in the past few months. So let's just get into the bullshit. And again, I invite you, if you need to, if you think it would help you, if you've been through some bullshit lately or in light of this pandemic or whatever, go ahead and use the comment section of this video as a place to vent. Anyway, venting can be healing. So, you know, 2021 started off on kind of it had a rough start because of the whole January 6th white supremacist coup attempt in the US. That was, the best way I could put it was I was shocked, but I was not surprised because of all the rhetoric and things going around, you know, questioning the integrity of the election, you know, all that Republican bullshit that they do to disenfranchise voters and try to stage a coup, right? A right-wing capitalist coup. So that was intense. And I made a video about that. And then by the end of January, and this is when the ball got rolling in terms of like the chaos being a little too chaotic for us, we found out some bad news regarding my partner's financial situation. So he will be losing his current employment at the end of June. So at least, you know, it wasn't like an immediate layoff. We got some buffer time to plan and take some actions for our financial stability and security, but you know, it's still, right now I'm still working on my research on my dissertation and I don't have an income right now. So, you know, I'm at the moment economically, we're both dependent upon his income, and to be losing that income, I mean, this isn't the first time that we've been through something like this. We've had a lot of kind of economic instability because, like, he was in grad school and trying to finish his shit, and I was in grad school, and we had the whole long distance thing, which paying 2 rents when you're both living off of a poor grad student income is not fun. You know, we've had lots of ups and downs, like economic security. Like long-term economic security, and when I say long-term, I mean something more than a semester or a year at a time. Not ever having that, it's tough, and I'm fucking tired of it. Fucking tired of it. But now with this pandemic and how that's gonna impact the global economy and what my job prospects are once I do hit the job market, I'm not too hopeful. I might have to get creative. I might have to shift and change. I've already begun the process of shifting and changing my expectations for what my work situation is going to be like in the foreseeable future, just to be real. I've even begun to kind of shift my expectations about which part of the world we're going to end up living in. Because of the economic situation and before the pandemic, the academic job market, especially in the humanities, because no one gives a fuck about the humanities, did not look good. Now, in light of this pandemic, with the repercussions of the pandemic. I don't even fucking know. So that's fun, you know, going to grad school for over a decade, thinking that you're gonna have one type of lifestyle and a type of job, and then to come to the realization that most likely you will not have that lifestyle, you will not have that type of job security, you will not have that kind of income. You know, and I'm a millennial. He's a kind of Gen X / millennial. My partner was born in the early 80s, but we're both kind of millennials, and it's like that millennial curse, you know, the millennials and Generation Z, you know, just being screwed over. Completely screwed over. We can't afford to buy houses and have families and stuff like older generations could because of neoliberal global capitalism. So, you know, I've been processing a lot of frustration and a lot of fear about economic instability, a lot of those kind of things, you know. Frustration, fear, disappointment, apathy, nihilism, all of it in terms of my career and like how things might end up. You know, we don't know if we're going to end up back in the US, even though the academic job market for what he does and his specialization and what he could do to get a job, you know, there's so many jobs in what he does. It would be easier for him to get a job than for me, except for his immigration status. Because the whole reason we had to come down to live in Chile is because he could not renew his visa in the US anymore. Like, he was forced out. And I have a video I made about that a few years ago explaining why. Because not a lot of American citizens or, you know, not a lot of American citizens have to understand how the US immigration system works, because they don't ever have to migrate anywhere, because that's economic privilege right there. So anyway, so I go into detail explaining that. So here we are in Chile, and then to get him a green card in the US, that process can take over a year. And even though we're legally married in the US and our marriage is recognized here in Chile, and we're taking care of the 2-year homestay requirement and blah, 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 it's still not completely guaranteed. And, you know, with this pandemic and everything going on, I don't know what the process is like now, the green card process for someone from Latin America. I don't know, like, you don't know for sure how long the process is going to take. Like, there's so many things that are up in the air in terms of that. And his immigration in the US has been a thing. You know, it's been a thing that we've had to deal with basically since we got married back in 2014. It was the whole reason why we got married back in 2014. Because we thought that it would help us, which it does. We thought it would help us more immediately than it did. Because even being married to a citizen, he was still forced out of the country, basically. But, you know, it's hard. So shout out to anyone out there who is in an international relationship that has to deal with borders and, you know, immigration. And I know there are a lot of people out there who have like such harder situations. I mean, look at what, you know, like the Trump administration and the child separation policy at the US-Mexico border and how fucked up all that was. So we're very privileged compared to that, you know, but most US citizens, especially I guess white people, they don't, I don't know if I've ever met a US citizen that really understood how the immigration system worked, unless they like were a lawyer specializing in immigration law. Because if you come from the global north, you know, in an economically like developed country like the US, you don't have to migrate. People in more desperate situations migrate to your country. Usually you're not the one migrating out, right? So anyway, it kind of gets old over like having to explain over and over again to people like why just by marrying me my partner was not allowed to stay in the country. Legally, I guess he could have overstayed his visa, but you know, there's so many, it's so complicated to be undocumented in the US, and that's another thing that like pisses me off about right-wing rhetoric, racist rhetoric in the US. Like the Fox News lies and bullshit, you know, that racist people just accept as fact because, you know, it's convenient for them, I guess. It's not easy to be undocumented in the US. It is not. So anyway, that's, you know, the most recent blow to our financial stability and economic situation that is tied to this larger situation that we always have hanging over our heads about his immigration and my immigration here in Chile, and like which country or hemisphere are we going to end up in? Are we going to end up having the jobs we thought we were going to have? Are we ever going to be able to afford our own home? Like all this bullshit, you know, I've been dealing with, and I'm sure a lot of people who lost their jobs and were laid off because of the pandemic, and people who are already in economically, you know, precarious situations. The pandemic, I'm sure, just made it worse for a lot of people. So I feel you. I feel you. So that's why we had to move. So I basically lost the entire month of February to the move because my partner had a hard deadline submitting an article, you know, to be published. And so I had to take on, you know, we had to buy a refrigerator and a stove and this piece of furniture back here and the kitchen countertop. You know, we had to buy some new furniture because the apartment or this tiny house that we moved into was pretty bare. I had to go like do all the online shopping for that and coordinate the delivery times and do all that and start packing like most of the stuff in the house. I took care of a lot of that. So that took up a lot of my time, and so I'm behind in my work and in my research. I think the maestro is about to cut a piece of wood outside, so that might be loud here in a second. Anyway, so that's just one thing, the economic job situation thing. The worst thing that happened at the same time was, and if you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen the post I made about it. And this is where I'm really going to get emotional. Our baby nephew, at the time he was only like 5, going on 6 months old. Our baby nephew was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy called West syndrome or infantile spasms. Globally, this only affects 1 out of every 4,000 births. And it's one of those things where it's like literally a parent's worst nightmare, other than losing their child, is to have a child go through something like this, especially when they're so young and vulnerable. So infantile spasms, like when you see the spasms happening, they look so benign compared to like our kind of stereotyped idea of what epilepsy looks like. But there's several kinds of epilepsy, right? So epilepsy is not always like the person convulsing on the ground, foaming at the mouth. That's just like one form of epileptic attack, right? So infantile spasms, it's usually diagnosed when the child is between 3 to 7 or 8 months of age. And I'll have some information down below just to raise awareness, but it is a neurological emergency situation, because every time that baby has a seizure or a spasm, there's a risk of permanent damage to the baby's brain and therefore to the baby's development. And from the research that I've been able to do to try to help them, the numbers that I've seen repeated in different articles are between 5 and 10% of babies diagnosed with this don't make it past their 5th birthday. And only about 20 to 30% live on to have what would be expected to be like normal or neurotypical psychomotor development. So the majority of these children will be severely impacted by this. And severely meaning like he might not ever be able to talk, you know. So seeing my brother-in-law and sister-in-law go through that with their child and how it has impacted the entire family, my mother-in-law, us, my other brother-in-law and his wife, you know, it's been like a tremendous economic burden for them. Because my partner, he comes from like a more poor working class background. And so, you know, even though the cost of healthcare here in Chile compared to what you're going to pay in the US, it's not as bad as it is in the US, but still, considering the cost of living and the amount of money people make, it's a lot. It's a lot. And we've had to help them pay for genetic testing that had to be sent to a laboratory in California, you know. And it's just been one thing after another. Like, at first they put him on the medicine, like a couple of different anti-seizure medications, you know, because the first thing that needs to happen is it needs to be diagnosed as soon as possible, and you need to try to control the spasms as soon as possible. And so at first, for like the first week or so, the medicine seemed to be working. He went like 8 days without having a single spasm, and then all of a sudden they came back again. And it's a race against the clock, right? Because every time there's a spasm, there could be damage happening, like permanent damage. And so most recently, the most crazy part of this has been just within the last couple weeks. So There is a medication that's actually injectable. I don't remember what it's called, but it seems to be the most reliable way to stop the spasms, you know. It does come with some pretty intense side effects, especially considering that you're injecting this stuff into an infant, you know. But it's a risk worth taking considering, you know, the brain damage thing. And in the US, this medication is so much easier to get a hold of that it's usually the first thing that the doctors will prescribe when a baby is diagnosed with infantile spasms. Well, since I'm in South America right now, in the developing world, when the doctors wanted to try this injectable medication on our nephew, the medication was not available in Chile. It wasn't here. And they weren't able to like bring it into Chile until like the end of May. And that, you know, every time this kid is having 4 or 5 attacks a day. So, you know, we all kind of like jumped to action to try to help them get their hands on this medication. You know, my partner and I, we were calling pharmaceutical companies in the US to see if they would mail it down to us. We were like making plans for my partner to actually fly with his brother to the US to buy it, to bring it down. Another option would be to buy it in Argentina, which is the option that they went with. But that week was like so intense and so frustrating and so sad. Like the medication that this child needs, like not being in this country, it's just, it was, I don't know how they kept their sanity that week. I think it was just adrenaline and survival instinct, you know? The instinct that comes with being a parent. So, they ended up sending money to a pharmaceutical company or a drugstore or something in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. Buying the medicine in Argentina. And then, right when all this stupid shit was going down, Argentina decides to close all of its borders to international travel. Like, all of its borders. If you were not an Argentinian citizen, and if you were not a relative, like a direct relative of someone in Argentina, you could not go to Argentina. Like, they would not let you in. And my brother-in-law, he contacted the embassy, he contacted the Chilean consulate in Buenos Aires, he contacted the Argentinian embassy here in Santiago, and no one was willing to do shit for them. And so, what ended up going down was my partner and I helped to pay for a plane ticket for a friend, their friend from church, because they're church-going people, who had parents in Argentina. We paid for him to fly to Argentina, and he's going to bring the medicine back. He's in Argentina right now. Like, it's been nuts. It's been nuts. So, that whole situation went down in the last couple weeks. And on top of everything, my mother-in-law had a bit of a health crisis happen. She lost consciousness and fainted 3 times at work. And then when she was brought home after that, she experienced some pretty significant memory loss. Like it was kind of scary she didn't remember anything. So she's been off of work for the last 2 weeks, recovering from that. But the problem is she might lose her job because of this. And if she loses her job, that is an economically catastrophic situation for like basically the whole family. Because she's the only one with a stable income at the moment, and she doesn't even make that much money. So all of this shit was going on. All of it. All at once. All at once. Okay, I had to like go calm down and blow my nose. I'm almost done with the dishes anyway. So that is how the chaos, usually the divine chaos that I worship and thrive on, got a little too real and a little too dark and a little too, you know, just a little too real. And that's where I've been for the past few months, is dealing with all this crazy ass shit. And so it's been hard to keep up with the spiritual practice in light of all of this, of course. You know, I packed up my altar, and it's only until like recently, like I didn't have access to my altar or my tarot cards for like nearly a month because of the moving process and everything. I also just didn't have the energy in me to keep up a daily spiritual practice, because it's the things happening to my partner's family and our moving and economic situation just took all of my energy and all of my focus, you know. So I know there must be people out there who kind of who've been through this kind of shit too, you know, like when life and the universe seems to throw you one curveball after another. And it can be hard, you know, it can be hard to keep up a spiritual practice and keep any sense of hope when you see these sorts of things. You know, I allowed my mind to go to some pretty abysmal, nihilistic places. And sometimes, you know, those abysmal, dark, nihilistic places have some truth to them. Like, I don't believe in literal personified deity. I'm not a hard polytheist. I approach the concept of the divine from a more psychological, esoteric kind of perspective. Because the universe, existence, whatever, it's indifferent. It's indifferent, you know, it doesn't care. There is no consciousness behind it to care, at least in my personal opinion. Which normally, to me, gives me actually a sense of strength and hope and empowerment, because I don't like the idea of being at the mercy of some like all-powerful being who depends on, you know, depending on how he's feeling, can like, you know, fuck around with my life or whatever, like that very Abrahamic God Book of Job bullshit, you know. I don't like that. Even a more kind of like new age understanding or new age idea of like the universe has your back, or just trust in the universe or whatever. The universe is indifferent. That's my personal perspective and opinion. And that being so means there is no inherent or innate meaning to your life, right? There is no inherent or innate trajectory. There is no, you know, destiny for you, which might sound nihilistic, on the surface, but underneath that, that means you have the freedom and the liberty of choice. You have the freedom and the liberty to choose and experiment with and change your meaning to your life, right? How you make sense of the chaos, how you make sense of all the events in your life, right? That's where I find empowerment personally. But when this indifferent universe keeps throwing balls of shit into your life and you see people that you love suffering, and you know that a lot of that suffering is the product of like some of the stupider aspects of how we've set up our world and our economies and shit, you know, just, it's incredibly frustrating and just depressing at the end of the day. Like, I understand the utility of believing that there's some sort of like higher power out there that has your back or cares about you, but I just consciously in my mind or whatever, I just, for me personally, I cannot force myself to believe in something like that. It doesn't make any sense, right? And so I'm just stuck with this choice to just like give in to the depression and the nihilism, or pick up my bootstraps, or, you know, get back on the horse, or whatever metaphor, and choose to try to apply or derive some sort of empowering, hopeful meaning out of these experiences. And so far, I think the only thing that I've been able to do is just to appreciate the inherent chaos of existence in this universe, bow down to the chaos in the existence of this universe, because it is ultimately something greater than me. It's been a great lesson of returning to the present moment and mindfulness, and becoming more aware of my own anxiety-ridden catastrophic thinking, and my own tendencies to focus maybe a little too much on the doom and gloom. I've learned more about myself and my depression through these experiences. I can't say that I'm going to practice any sort of gratitude or be grateful at all for these experiences, because that would be like feeling grateful that my nephew might be dealing with permanent brain damage for the rest of his life because of this shit. Like, I'm not going to be grateful for that. I'm not going to be grateful for the stress and anxiety and the tears that were shed by, you know, my partner's family members because of this. I'm not grateful for that. But I think it would be like inappropriate to use that grateful or gratitude word for this experience, but at the very least, and we as a family are stronger for this, and there have been some small lessons and perspectives that I've been able to gain going through this and witnessing my partner's family going through this, learning more about myself and learning more about like what endurance really means, and what vulnerability really means, and what the value of relationships. Since I'm, you know, married into this family, you know, it's not like my blood family, but they've opened their hearts to me, and I've been able to open my heart to them, and just how we need each other to get through these kind of crisis times. You know, and that's something that's really struck me, because I do have that kind of that social anxiety that comes from complex trauma in childhood, where you fear vulnerability and you fear relationships, and you don't trust other people, and you have your own fears and anxieties about like getting close to people. this experience has forced me to get a little bit over that shit. And, you know, to solidify a lot of bonds and relationships. And this, I can also see this kind of healing of relationships happening between my partner and his brothers, between my partner and his mother, and, you know, my mother-in-law and her sons. Like, it's really, the situation is shitty, but the situation has forced the family to kind of be there for each other when it matters. So it's just opened my eyes to go through a lot of this shit. And I guess that's, you know, the best that you can do when the universe throws you a bunch of like curveballs covered in dog shit, and that shit hits the fan over and over and over again, especially in a short period of time. You know, the best that I've been able to do is to keep that relatively open mind, and also give myself the permission to feel my feelings without judging my feelings, right? Because I had a lot of anger at the universe, a lot of rage, a lot of just being so aware of how fucking unfair this is, you know, and I allowed myself to feel those fucking feelings without unapologetically and without any sort of judgment. Just allowing myself to get it out of my system, process it. Yeah, that is really, really important. Just feel the feels. And if you want to learn something from this experience, then go ahead and give yourself the permission to learn something from the experience, but no pressure, you know, no pressure to feel grateful for it or whatever, you know, because it's, you know, you just have to kind of face the stark, naked reality every once in a while, right, of life and death and the indifferent universe. You know. Anyway, I think you know, that's everything that we've been through in the last 2 or 3 months or so, which is a lot. So I appreciate your patience. Pete Walker's CPTSD book review is coming shortly, and I also want to give a little house tour of our tiny home here in Santiago, and also, you know, make some more witchy content, share some tips and tricks that have helped me for healing or beginning my journey with healing my CPTSD, and maybe get some more book reviews going and just kind of enjoy the last few weeks of summer before autumn and winter come down here. That is how this chaos witch witched my way through epic levels of bullshit. So yeah, I appreciate it. Feel free to vent in the comments if you've also been through like some of those shit covered curveballs lately, or if you have things to celebrate down in the comments, celebrate that too, because you know, not everything is bad. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, many blessings. Bye.